Surgeon General's warning: smoking causes lung cancer, heart disease, emphysema, and may complicate pregnancy. Moose Lake is a rural town located in northeastern Minnesota, about 45 miles south of Duluth. Moose Lake was known for the Great Fire of 1918 and for its prison, agate center, lakes, and summer tourists. Like cities all over the country, Moose Lake was not left out in the early 1900s when the rush to the lighter took over the country. At that time, the popular and cool thing to do was to go out back and smoke a cigarette with your friends. Little did people know the huge consequences that would result from looking cool.
When the realization that smoking was harmful set in, people began trying to outlaw it where non-smokers could be affected. Minnesota's first attempt was the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act that was established in 1975. Regarding the bill, co-author Phyllis Kahn says,
It was the strongest law on no smoking in public places, probably in the country. And the important thing that it did, when we passed it, and we passed it in 1975, the important thing was that every other law that had written before that just listed kind of an increasing number of places where you couldn't smoke. What this bill did took a different approach, which is we prohibited smoking everywhere unless it was expressively permitted. And where it was permitted, we required a division, into no smoking and smoking sections, and like in a restaurant.
by passing this law, Minnesota was the first state to pass legislation that limits smoking in the workplace. California became the first state to make restaurants 100% smoke-free in 1998. Many states soon followed. Finally, it was Minnesota's turn.
In the 1970s, Ramel Jones, small-town restaurant owner, grew tired of the negative effects of secondhand smoke and wished to eliminate smoking in her restaurant. Partnering with the American Lung Association on a trial basis, Arts Cafe and the city of Moose Lake became the first city in Minnesota to eliminate smoking in restaurants. This grassroots movement, started by Ramel Jones, led to a statewide ban on smoking in restaurants.
Pat McCone is the Director for Tobacco Control Programs and Policy for the American Lung Association. After seeing the success other states had, she wanted to go smoke-free in restaurants in Minnesota.
When we started talking about would this be possible in Minnesota and what did it look like, we had examples from other states.
Meanwhile, in the town of Moose Lake, Ramel Jones was busy as the owner of the restaurant Arts Cafe. Often thought of as the smokiest place in town, Arts Cafe was known for its good food and cheap prices. Ramel loved her restaurant, but not all the smoke that came with it. She had seen firsthand the effect smoking had on people's health. Both of her parents smoked all their lives and died of lung cancer as a result.
Ramel wanted to make a change and have Arts Cafe be smoke-free, but she was afraid to do it on her own.
People would say, oh, you're going to go out of business and nobody will come in here anymore. And one day I got a phone call from the American Lung Association, and a voice on the other end of the phone said, what would you think of Arts Cafe being smoke-free? And I said, and I remember I was standing right here in this kitchen when I got the phone call, and I said, I would love it. What can I do to help?
We really wanted to reach out to the business people to just let them know that we were talking about this and to invite them to come to the table, but we didn't expect that they would be friendly. And for the most part, that was true. So the last phone call to the business person was actually Arts Cafe. And my staff person said to me at the time, I really don't want to make this call. It's the smokiest place in town. I know I'm just going to get yelled at. And then she said, do I have to? And I said, yes, you don't have to make it long, but just that we have reached out. And she made that phone call to Ramel, and I think afterward she was so excited.
Now that the American Lung Association had Ramel on their side, they needed to set their plan in action.
The first step in any kind of policy change is to educate both those people most directly impacted, but the community also as a whole. So we really work to educate people about the why there should be a change, the health effects around secondhand smoke, the research that had been done to that time on any kind of economic impact of making the change, and then to listen to the stories and listen to the questions and concerns and address those as best that we could.
Like put ads in the paper. They asked to be on the agenda for city council meetings, and it's stating what the topic would be. We want the idea of introducing an ordinance, and this brought a lot of people out. And of course, people started really talking about it as well, because many were opposed as well as many were for it. I talked as much as I could, I guess.
Once the topic was out there, people voiced their opinions, both positive and negative.
Some fellow dedicated a whole website to really trashing our work and myself personally. So I would get, threatening phone calls. I know Ramel did, and that was very unfortunate. I kept trying to think. People get very emotional if they think what you're going to do is going to cause them to lose their job or their business, and all that fear that comes with what our head can tell us is probably going to happen. That didn't happen. It didn't outweigh the phone calls that I would get from workers or from parents of children with asthma or people that were suffering from disease that says, you got to help us. That positive way outweighed the negative.
Many people voiced their opinions in letters to the editor.
I was called a communist in one, and then another guy told me that I was a pioneer. And I thought, I'm a little communist pioneer. But it was lots and lots of opinions and lots of sorting the issue out. And was it really harmful?
The whole town was holding its breath on July 12, 2000. This was the night the city council voted on the ordinance.
There were a couple of very strong champions. There were one or two that were pretty against it, and one that was in the middle. So the one in the middle is, of course, the one you want to focus some attention on.
That swing vote belonged to a man named John Unzen. The American Lung Association knew they needed to get John on their side in order for the ordinance to pass.
I always like to say, what can we do to make your ability to vote yes easier? So what do you need to happen in order to vote yes?
Even though Pat and the American Lung Association were working hard to get him on their side, John says the real clincher was what the people had to say.
I got quite a few calls from people, pro and con, very strong, feelings on both sides. It wasn't so much, what they did. I think it was the, I'll call it Joe average citizen calls that I was getting.
John decided to vote yes, and the ordinance was passed. Now the question was, would it work?
In the end, after a few years of no smoking in any of the restaurants, business was better than ever.
Because of the success in Moose Lake, other cities decided it could work for them too.
I think there was pressure if sort of Little Moose Lake could do it. I think that there was a little bit of pressure on Duluth to do it.
When a fire starts, it starts small with that spark. And then it needs more fuel and more oxygen. So I think Moose Lake was the spark. I think some of the fuel and oxygen came after Duluth, a larger city that some of the metropolitan areas could more relate to. It did, and then I think the really big bonfire started when the Twin Cities went, when Minneapolis and St. Paul. And that definitely, it was then not a matter of if the state would go smoke-free, but when. But once again, you cannot have a fire without a spark, and that spark was Moose Lake.
At a statewide level, there were many complaints that the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act wasn't strong enough. Even though there was a smoking section in restaurants, the smoke still traveled throughout the whole restaurant.
State Representative Phyllis Kahn co-wrote the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act in 1975. She was a big supporter of the amendment to her act, Freedom to Breathe. This amendment revised the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act and made stricter rules as to where you could smoke. This act outlawed smoking entirely in restaurants and bars in Minnesota.
Because of the push from cities and towns all over Minnesota, the Freedom to Breathe Act was signed into law on May 16, 2007 by Governor Tim Pawlenty and took effect on October 1, 2007. Something so small as one person can turn the course of history in a different direction. By Ramel taking a chance with her restaurant, she opened the door for a healthier tomorrow. Ramel created a spark, and today there's no smoking in restaurants in Minnesota and 27 states nationwide.